protests are happening across Israel today, calling for a ceasefire deal to secure the release of the hostages held in Gaza. 251 hostages were taken when Hamas attacked on October the 7th, 2023. Of those still being held, 20 are believed to still be alive. Now, the demonstrations come a day after an Israeli strike reportedly killed at least 20 people, including 5 journalists, at a large hospital in Gaza. We can talk about all of this with our reporter in Tel Aviv, Shosh Bedrosian. A very good afternoon from us in London. Can you paint a picture of these protests for us, where they're taking place, Shosh, and how many people have joined in?
Sure. Thanks for having me on. So the protests mark the second nationwide strikes that have taken place this month alone, in the month of August. This morning, they started around 6:30 a.m., which is symbolic because that's the exact time the October 7th massacre happened back in 2023. Between 6:30 a.m. and 10 a.m., thousands of protesters went to the junctions of major intersections across the country of Israel, flocking there and protesting for the release of the hostages, supporting these families who have been fighting for their loved ones to come home for about 690 days at this point in time, blocking traffic across major highways. Actually, right now, it's being reported that there are major highways across central Israel being blocked, specifically in between major cities like Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv, with traffic actually standing still in several locations. We're expecting a massive protest to take place in Hostages Square tonight. And we've seen this in the last nationwide strike that happened just a few weeks ago, where 600,000 people at the last rally of the day came out in Tel Aviv.
So with regard to that last protest, which was the biggest seen so far until today, it didn't move the dial, though, did it, politically, in terms of the Netanyahu approach to the hostages and Gaza? Would that be fair to say?
I think I differ on that statement. I'll tell you why. After that protest, we know that Prime Minister actually instructed a team to start negotiating a different type of deal, a comprehensive deal, a deal that would get all 50 hostages back. Right now, we know that there's a partial deal that's on the table right now. And it's a deal that Hamas actually pushed away back in July. It's this U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff's proposal that sought for a 60-day ceasefire in exchange for 10 living hostages, 18 dead hostages, in exchange for dozens of Palestinian prisoners. But Hamas came back to the table after we know there's been military pressure, specifically on Israel wanting to expand in Gaza City. But after these protests, we know that Netanyahu is like he made a statement on it just last week. He instructed negotiators to start working on a comprehensive deal. So that's what has come out of that. Let's see what comes out, though, tonight with these protests, and see, the messaging from the families, seeing who will be speaking at the major protests that will be taking place tonight. We know that families of these hostages usually speak, but also released hostages who have been able to talk about the conditions that they were held in Hamas captivity. And like I said earlier, if I didn't, 20 living hostages are believed to be still in Gaza at this point in time.
How much of the protest is also calling for a ceasefire in Gaza?
I think calling for a hostage deal also calls for a ceasefire, because that's what we've seen in the past deals. Every time there was a deal, there was a pause in fighting that came with it. So back in between the months of January through March, there was a ceasefire in place with these hostages that were released. And so there wasn't fighting that happened, but these hostages did manage to come out, many of them in groups. I don't think Israeli society thought this would go on for this long. Thinking about these hostages that are alive, what conditions they could possibly be in. I want your audience to know that the family of one of the living hostages, Nimrod Cohen, who was kidnapped on October 7th as a soldier from his tank. His family decided last night to release the video that the IDF obtained of his kidnapping on that horrific day. He was taken from his tank. He was one of the only soldiers to live and survive that moment from his tank. And he was seen, arm in arm with these terrorists that forced him into Gaza. Those were his last moments seen alive on camera. So, of course, the families here wanting to make sure that the public and the government continues to see what they're fighting for.
Do you believe that this will move things on at all? Netanyahu is not in a totally secure position politically, but actually there just never seems to be any real movement. I take on board what you've told us about Hamas being more willing to come to the table over a different deal on the hostages. But Shosh, we've been reporting over the last 24 hours about 20 more people killed, the Israeli strike on a hospital in Gaza, 5 journalists dead too. It is hard to see that a progress towards any kind of peace is being made.
Yeah, I think the devastation and the tragedy of lives being lost in Gaza is seen by everyone in Israel, and the desperation of food is also seen by many people in Israel as well. Just the center focus, though, and the reason why this war, as many people believe, is still so much ongoing, is because these hostages are still there. There's a statement and a sentence everyone here in Israel continues to say. If Hamas wanted to end this war, they would give the hostages back. And at this point in time, for people to know that there are 20 people being starved to death, we all saw that horrific video Hamas released of Eviatar David just a few weeks ago, of his gaunt condition. That's the focus for so many Israelis of getting these lives back. It's part of it's a Jewish backbone and a Jewish practice of preserving life. And that's the value the Israeli people stand on.
Sure. I fully understand all of this, and I don't want my next question to seem insensitive with regard to everything that you've just said. But Shosh, if there was more protest from Israelis about the treatment of Gazans, there is a worldwide abhorrence about the starvation, particularly of children within Gaza at the moment. Are you saying that doesn't come into the protest and shouldn't come into the protest? There is no wish for that to be within a protest?
No, I think that there's a spectrum of people that come out to the protests who also protest for a ceasefire to end the suffering in Gaza, who want to end the suffering of the hostages. I think that, Israel's a democratic country. People come out in all different forms with all different values, and that's the really interesting part about reporting on the ground here is when you go to Hostages Square, you meet people who come from all different walks of life and want to see the war ending for pretty much all the reasons that you just listed. Either it's hunger in Gaza, whether it's airstrikes in Gaza and the military action, but also as I continue to say, the hostages that are suffering and these families that are completely torn apart. So I think that there's a spectrum, and I don't think there's any right answer to that question. I think Israel has so many diverse people who are protesting for different reasons here.
The next elections in Israel wouldn't be until October, correct?
Correct.
Do you think that you will be in a different position in Israel if something doesn't happen over the next coming weeks in Gaza in order to try and bring the hostages home? I mean, it's interesting if we all try and cast our mind back to a more peaceful time before the dreadful events of October 2023. The political position of Benjamin Netanyahu was not secure then, was it? There were challenges over other aspects of his Likud government. So what do you think politically does happen over the coming months?
I think that's a good question. And I don't know if that's a question I can even answer or anyone in Israel can answer, because every single day it's changing. For us as journalists, we're constantly covering different things. It's hard to see what will happen politically, even within the next 2 months, because remember, in mid-September, there's a planned there's plans approved to go into Gaza City. So I think it's kind of all eyes are on that and how that operation goes into effect. There's going to be about 60,000 reservists who are getting called up in this. What will this do to Israeli society? Will Israeli society be in a completely different place, even looking at the political spectrum? So I think it's a matter of a waiting game, as it always is in Israel, to see how these events shape out.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to us today. That's Shosh Bedrosian joining us from Tel Aviv.